on this important issue for Oakland. I am Gail Wallace from the League of Women Voters, and my co-presenter this morning will be Nicole Nedich of SPUR. And that is because SPUR and the League of Women Voters have been asked to co-facilitate the mayor's working group. She established this working group, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a moment, to examine ways in which our city charter could be improved to create the conditions for better governance in Oakland. Before we get started, I have one housekeeping thing. We're going to activate the Q&A so that you can place your questions there. You can access the Q&A through the More button on your set of options. And if you click on that More button, you should see your Q&A possibility. And that's where you can enter your questions. We won't take questions as they come in, but we definitely will tackle them once we finish the presentation. All right, next slide, please. I want to give you a bit of a heads up where we're headed this morning. The first thing we're doing is taking a moment to understand what we have currently in Oakland's city charter and how we wound up with the charter that we have. After that, we're going to explore governance options, which show us possible paths to change the charter, should we consider that desirable. And then finally, we're going to have an opportunity for discussion for you to be in small groups for a short period of time, talking with each other, and for the groups to report out to the wider attendance today so that we can hear a bit from everybody, from as many people as possible. And of course, we'll be looking at your questions. And then we want to finish by letting you know how things will roll out and what you can look for as the next steps in this charter reform process. So we want to start out with a little 2-minute video, which will give you an overview of the ideas and the challenges.
Nicole, we can't hear it.
Okay, I'm going to try that again. Let's see.
I think you may have to be unmuted.
Okay, please let me know right away if you still can't hear it.
Do you know that Oakland has a city charter, a document that sets the rules for how our local government operates? A charter is more than just a piece of paper. It's a contract between our community and our city government. Voters approve it, and the city follows it. When Oakland grows or our needs change, the public or our elected representatives can amend the charter to keep it up to date. The charter outlines how the city runs, who's in charge of what, and who makes which decisions. In short, the charter serves as Oakland's local constitution, laying the foundation for how we govern ourselves. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, Oakland's charter evolves frequently. The last complete overhaul was in 1968, and since then, there have been dozens of revisions. The most significant change came in 1998, when Oakland shifted from a system called council manager, where the mayor sat on the city council, to one where the mayor leads the executive branch. This created a separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches. Both systems can work well, depending on how they're designed and implemented. Lately, it's been the talk of the town that Oakland's charter is in need of change to better respond to the priorities of Oaklanders. Some say the roles and responsibilities of city officials aren't clearly defined. Others point to recent budget challenges and wonder if charter changes could help stabilize the city's finances. And many simply want greater accountability and transparency from city leaders. To address these questions, Mayor Barbara Lee has formed a working group led by the League of Women Voters and SPUR to review the charter and make recommendations for improvement. But remember, any proposed changes must be approved by Oakland voters. We all want an Oakland that works for everyone. Get involved and help shape our city's future. Did you know that Oakland...
Sorry. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mayor's working group. The mayor formed this working group to really look at three areas of Oakland's charter. The charter covers a number of different things, including how we hold elections, how we administer the budget, but the mayor really wanted us to focus on these core issues: better defining the roles of elected officials, addressing responsible city financial planning, and improving government accountability and transparency. So that's the charge of this working group, and that's what we'll be talking about mostly today. The mayor also appointed a number of people to this working group. The working group is composed of a bunch of people with a lot of experience working in the city of Oakland and outside of the city on various different charter work. So we have people who have served as city administrators, as attorneys in the city, who have experience with ethics, with public finance, with the labor community and the business community, and we're really pleased to be working with all of these people. And we have a couple of them here on the call today. Corey Cook, who is here, and Ernestine Nettles is here. And they'll be splitting up in some of the breakout sessions with you later today. So please do ask them questions. And then just a quick timeline in terms of how we're rolling all of this out. This effort started in September with the kickoff meeting of the working group. We put together a survey and made that available to the public, and we hope you all take that survey as well if you haven't already. We'll be sharing the link to that later on in the program. We've conducted 13 listening sessions throughout Oakland, in all of the districts in Oakland, as well as this is the second Zoom meeting that we've done. Last night we had a fun happy hour as well. And so we're hearing a lot from Oakland residents. We've also done dozens of interviews with people who have currently worked for the city, have previously worked for the city, who have held various different official roles, as well as a number of other cities. We've talked to a number of other leaders in other cities just to understand how their governments are structured, and what works there, and what we can learn. All of this will culminate in a report that'll be released in January of 2026. It'll be available publicly and address the structure of Oakland's current charter, and be informed by what we've learned from all of these interviews, the research, and the listening sessions. Then the work of the working group will be done, but that's not the end of the process. There will still be a process to get any recommendations that people want to move forward onto the ballot, and that could happen through the legislative process by having some council members pick up a measure and draft a measure and move it through the legislative process, which would include additional opportunities for community engagement, or through a citizen signature gathering initiative where people could place this on the ballot themselves. And then most likely what this is leading to is a ballot measure in November of 2026. So we just want to make sure everybody knows that any charter amendments that get proposed do require a vote of Oakland voters. So you'll see this in the future. So we're going to go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna dive in and begin first talking about the roles, or if you want to think of it in terms of job descriptions that are actually articulated in the charter. These give us the identity, or at least the jobs of the key players. So first of all, we have the city council. The city council, under the current charter, holds all powers of legislation, but no administrative powers, and that is typical. We have 8 members in our city council, 7 of whom are elected by district, and 1 of whom is elected at large. And then we have the mayor, who is the chief elective officer of the city and who provides leadership, takes issues and leadership for the people, marshals public interest in and support for municipal activity. And the mayor is elected and can serve up to 2 4-year terms. The city attorney serves as legal counsel to the mayor and the city council and to all departments of government that are not independent. As an example of a department that would have independence, you would have the Public Ethics Commission. The city attorney also is elected to a 4-year term, but has no term limit. Final elected person in the city is the city auditor, who prepares the books, the financial records of the city and its accounts, as the council may request. He reports to the council and he advises and makes recommendations to the city administrator. The city auditor, like the city attorney, is elected for a 4-year term, but there is no term limit to that office. The charter also defines certain appointed roles, the first one being the city administrator. The city administrator is responsible for administering all the affairs of the city. For a shorthand, that person is responsible for running the city. They have the power to appoint and remove directors of departments and employees who are under their jurisdiction, and they have the authority to execute and enforce all laws and ordinances and policies that come to them from the council. This city administrator is currently, under our charter, appointed by the mayor, but subject to confirmation by the council, and can only be removed by the mayor. So those are the key players that we will be talking about today, because you will see that the governing powers are distributed among those elected officials and the city administrator in several different ways. And the way they are distributed and apportioned among them defines essentially the different forms of government that we'll be asking you to consider today. However, I do want to point out that there are 2 other appointed roles that the city charter defines. There's the role of the city clerk, who keeps accurate public records for the city of Oakland and who is appointed or removed by the city administrator, subject to confirmation by the council. And then, of course, there are appointments connected with the multiple boards and commissions. And it's the council that creates, modifies, or discontinues boards and commissions by ordinances, unless certain commissions have been established in the charter. And those would include the Public Ethics Commission, the Police Commission, the Board of Education, the Port Commission, and the Civil Service Board. So unless we say it otherwise, the commissioners are appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation by the council.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the different forms of government that we see in other cities. Most American cities typically adopt one of 2 different forms of government. One is a strong mayor form, and that's otherwise known as a mayor-council form, where the mayor serves as the city's chief executive, with a clear separation between the executive and the legislative branches. In a council manager system, which is the other form of government that is widely seen across the United States, the city council acts as a unified legislative authority. And when there is a mayor, that mayor typically sits on the city council and appoints a professional city manager to run the administration. We're going to walk through these 2 models in greater detail a little bit later in the program. But the core difference to understand here is that the strong mayor system has a separation of powers between the executive and legislative branch, and you have elected officials on both sides. And the council manager is a unified legislative body where that entire legislative body sets the policies and appoints a professional city manager to run operations. Oakland structure is unique in that it distributes power among all of these players, as Gail noted, the mayor, the city council, and the city administrator, in ways that we haven't seen in any other city that we've looked at, and that blurs traditional lines of executive and legislative authority. We've basically tried to mash these two forms of government up, but they are very distinct, different ways of governing altogether. So how we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about that. The charter lays out some governing powers, and this is consistent in every city that has its own city charter. Each charter lays out the powers of executive leadership. Typically, in other cities, the executive is either the mayor, the elected mayor, in a strong mayor form of government, or the city manager in a council manager form of government. And that means that they have the power, they have the authority to enforce all laws and policies of the city of Oakland. In Oakland, we split this executive power between the mayor and the city administrator in ways that typically doesn't happen in other cities. So in a strong mayor city, typically the executive leadership would sit with the mayor solely, and you would have an executive that sits with the city manager and a council manager. We have a mayor who's not a chief executive officer. Our charter names the mayor the chief elected officer, and they hold very limited power. They appoint the city administrator, or they nominate city administrators, and the council confirms. And they can let a city administrator go. But the city administrator actually holds all of the powers of the executive branch under their wing. So they appoint and fire all of the department directors, and they are the one that is responsible in our city charter for upholding all laws and policies in Oakland. So that's different than we see in other cities. Another area that the charter lays out is legislative powers. In pretty much every model, the city council holds legislative power. So they are responsible for creating our laws and policies, and they don't typically hold any administrative power, and that is consistent in Oakland. Charters also lay out budgetary powers in strong mayor forms of government. Typically, the mayor prepares a proposed budget, and the council would amend and adopt a proposed budget. In a council manager form of government, it's typically the city manager who would prepare the budget, and the council would adopt the budget. And this is consistent in Oakland too. As a mayor-council city, our mayor proposes the budget, and the council adopts it. What is different about Oakland than other cities is this area of checks and balances. While we're considered a mayor-council form of government, the mayor doesn't hold certain powers that you would expect typically in a strong mayor or mayor-council form of government, and that mostly comes in the form of veto power. So typically in a strong mayor form of government, the mayor would have veto power over legislation and budgets, so that they can make sure that any policies that are coming through the council are aligned with the administrative capacity of the city, whether that's resources or staffing. Typically, the council holds the ultimate legislative authority. They can override any kind of mayoral veto with a 2/3 vote, but none of that exists right now. Currently in Oakland, we don't have a veto power. We don't have a council override. The only role that the mayor currently plays in the legislative process is as a tiebreaker when the council is tied on any decisions, which is definitely an unusual thing for a mayor-council city. In a council manager city, you get that legislative consistency and all of the leaders on the same page by just having them all on the city council together. So anything that gets adopted has to have the majority vote of the council, and the mayor sits on that board with a vote. So we have done, as we shared earlier, have done a lot of interviews and looked at a lot of different cities. And this is the problem statement that just continues to surface. Unclear roles and misaligned authority in Oakland's government create a disconnect between public expectations and actual powers. Residents elect a mayor to lead, but the office holds limited authority. The city council is often held accountable for constituent concerns, but they don't have any levers to hold the administration responsible for performance. And the city administrator, because they report to the mayor and can be fired by the mayor, but they are responsible for carrying out all the laws and policies of the city council. They're caught between these unclear and conflicting priorities from multiple elected leaders. I'm going to turn it back to Gail, who's going to talk a little bit about how we got here.
Right. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that how intensely involved the mayor has been in supporting this effort by coming to many of the meetings, although she's unavailable to come today. And we also have had council members at the meetings in their various districts. And I want to acknowledge that we have here today Council Member Carol Fife. So we've appreciated their support in allowing us to have these meetings throughout the districts of Oakland. We've been in every one. All right, let's talk about how we wound up having such a distinctive feature in our city charter that we've configured these roles and responsibilities differently than any other place we can find. So many of you may remember at least the tail end of the period from 1931 until 1998, when Oakland operated under a council manager form of government. That would be to say that if there were a mayor, that mayor sits on the city council. There were attempts in 1984 and in 1996 to move towards a strong mayor form of government, but those attempts failed. However, Jerry Brown arrived in Oakland with quite a bit of influence. So in 1998, he brought forward this Measure X to establish a strong mayor form of government. And however, Measure X, which gave Jerry Brown, as chief executive of a city, the full powers that you would expect to have in a strong mayor system, including the veto and the full executive authority. However, it only introduced to be valid for 6 years. At that point, it would either expire or need to be renewed. Mayor Brown decided to move forward on the ballot after just 4 years, which in retrospect looked ill-advised because he was trying to make the measure permanent, but that measure to do so failed. So then we had 2 years left in the charter that gave him the strong mayor powers, but the option of making that permanent had failed. And so a charter review commission was set up to decide how to move forward in another direction besides the strong mayor, which had been rejected. And so it was Measure P that passed in 2004 at the point where Measure X expired. And that kept the mayor council form, but did not give the mayor veto power. So that was definitely a fork in the road when we could have reconsidered either returning to council manager or again thinking that we would go with strong mayor. And instead we created a little bit of a combination of elements from each of those forms of government. Next slide, please. So we wanted to identify for a moment some of the reasons that we might want to look at charter change now and ask, what do we want to keep in mind? What are the goals when we formulate a new charter proposal? And these are some that we have come up with, which is clarity on who is responsible for what, responsive and accountable leadership, and efficient, coordinated, and equitable service delivery, and financial stability and responsible stewardship of public resources. I want to pause here for a moment. I'm going to remind you, you have that Q&A button under the more on your choices. So if you go to more, the circle with the 3 dots on my computer, and you click on that, you will see your Q&A. And we're going to ask you for the next just minute or two to answer this question. What surprises you about Oakland's structure of government? What are we telling you today that's news to you? And what objectives do you think should be considered as Oakland moves forward to considering charter change? And Nicole's going to monitor that Q&A for us. And so again, the two questions are, what surprises you about Oakland's structure of government? And what other objectives should be considered as we move forward? And after we take a look at some of those responses, take this moment to go ahead and enter any thoughts of yours. We'll articulate even more fully some of the choice points between these two forms of government.
We do have a couple of questions more about the form of government and what it'll do to, which is what we're going to really be discussing later. But which form of government is most efficient and responsive? Which forms of government will specifically increase government accountability, efficiency, and responsiveness, measure outcomes? Do we have some specific examples of where things fail today that would be solved by either of these? And I think we're going to get a little bit into that in the next forum as we start to think about what these different ones are.
I will volunteer that during the meetings and community listening sessions that we've had all across the city in all the districts, that people have often said, that's funny. I thought we had a full, strong mayor form of government. So in answer to the question of what surprises you, they're surprised that we're not already there in a typical, typically constituted form of strong government.
There's a few other comments here. Surprised that the city council does not appoint supervisor set goals for the city administrator who runs the city operations. That elected city attorney and auditor, how do people assess their qualifications? Should they perhaps be selected by council, the administrator or mayor? Auditor should have a longer term to take them away from the dependence on electoral situation. We see something here about community voice baked into governance, formal roles for residents, youth, and impacted communities and commissions, oversight bodies, and charter mandated advisory processes, not handpicked insider. We want real representation. Oakland needs more unified, accountable form of government, mayor on the city council with veto power, city manager appointed, city attorney appointed, not elected. We are going to talk a little bit about some proposals. Are there other management jobs that would be better done by a city administrator rather than a strong mayor? Someone surprised about the lack of clarity between the administrative and legislative function. Surprised about the separation of powers, which takes power away from the people. Would charter reform include neighborhood councils? How can voters better assess performance of those that we elect? I think that there needs to be a way to have veto power, for the mayor to have veto power in the city council for a way to override the veto. All right, so all of these are in here. I'm going to stop reading now. Keep adding to this list. We will be saving this list, and we really appreciate all of the input. But we'll move on to talking about a couple of approaches that we're going to talk more about today. Let me get back to sharing my screen. Hold on just a second.
Okay, I'm going to take us through these alternative approaches, really trying to, again, articulate some of the differences. So we looked at the ways in which Oakland City Charter is different from other cities. Now we want to look how the approaches adopted by other cities are different from each other, because virtually all the cities in the United States use either what we are calling approach A or approach B. There are slight modifications within each model, but there is a distinctiveness to each model, which we hope this slide and the next will help you appreciate. And the first thing I want to do, which is not on this slide, is give you a little list for the cities that use the approach A of strong mayor. So those among the many cities are Cleveland, Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, San Diego, Fresno, and San Francisco. Many people have questions about which cities are doing what, and so I just wanted to give you that little sampling. All right, let's dive in. A strong mayor, as we've mentioned before, gives a mayor veto authority over both legislation and budget line items. Why is that necessary? Because this form of government separates the government into an executive and a legislative branch. And the veto authority, many people argue, is the way that you ensure the executive and the legislative branch are talking to each other and coming together with policy that can then be implemented in your city's administration. So when the two executive and legislative branches are separated, the veto power allows the mayor to say no to a line item of the budget, which is not the case now. Now the mayor proposes the budget and the city council enacts it. Similarly with legislation, if the mayor has an objection to legislation, concerns about whether the priorities or the resources available to implement proposed legislation, that's not within the mayor's purview to raise a significant objection that would engender conversation and ultimate agreement. Now, when a mayor has a veto power, it's not absolute. Like I say, it's a tool. So because the council is always given the opportunity to override a mayoral veto with a supermajority vote, which in most cities is a 2/3 vote. So that's how you kind of try and get to that speak with one voice to the administration in this type of approach. Additionally, a strong mayor is the one who is given by the charter direct responsibility for city administration. That means that it's the mayor who's going to organize the running of the city by setting up a system of deputy mayors or cabinet officials to oversee functional areas like public safety or infrastructure or housing, or alternatively by retaining a city administrator position, someone who would report directly to the mayor, but would really be handling the day-to-day operations. All right, contrast to that, a council manager form of government. And as I did with the strong mayor, I just want to give you a short list of some of the cities that use this form of government. They would include Long Beach, Berkeley, San Jose, Sacramento, Phoenix, and El Paso, among many others. So this approach is distinct from strong mayor because you do not have the separation of legislative and executive, with the mayor in one place, the council in another. Here, the council is your government, is a unitary form of government, and your mayor becomes a member of the council. Then the mayor is distinguished from other members of the council in being elected citywide for the most part, while other members of the council would be elected by district. The mayor often serves as the president of the city council when you have this form of government. In that role, the mayor would chair the council meetings, set agendas, and serve as the ceremonial head of the city. And then you get a collective decision to hire the city manager. And so the council is hiring and the council is firing that person who is going to be handling the day-to-day workings of the city. And again, by contrast, it would be the mayor creating that structure, which it could include hiring that person. So the city manager then takes on those administrative responsibilities, hiring and firing department heads, directing staff, allocating resources, and coordinating operations. The council collectively would exercise oversight through the budget process and demand performance reporting and set policy direction, but would not interfere in the day-to-day administration of the city. So that you got a hired professional trained to do that, and you have your council still doing its legislative tasks and also exercising oversight over the performance of your city manager. Next slide, please. So this slide is a different way of presenting the information we just went through on the last slide. It's graphic. Hopefully it helps you wrap your arms around some of the differences in these two forms of government. Again, on the left, you see the structure of a strong mayor form of government. You see how the city council sits in one place as the legislative branch and the mayor in another as the executive branch, all of them being elected officials. The city council has the distinct responsibilities for passing laws and formulating policies. The mayor has operations and service delivery responsibility through whatever administrative hierarchy they set up. But notice you've got those horizontal lines between city council and mayor. That's where your veto is at work, right? Getting them to talk to each other about legislation and about the budget. And then also you've got a horizontal line where we have to ensure that the laws and policies are prioritized in a way and communicated so that operations and service delivery can be responsive. On the right-hand side, we're looking at council manager. And you note there's just one elected line. The Oakland voters elect the city council with their mayor. As I pointed out, city council by district, mayor citywide. Then the city manager hires a city manager or administrator. Council retains the same responsibility that it has in the other model for laws and policies. They retain some oversight of operations and service delivery. But it's the city manager appointed by the mayor, and that's why the dotted line is around the city manager. That's an appointed position. And that person is responsible for operations and service delivery. Nicole, back to you.
Thanks. I'm getting a comment here that you can't see the whole slide. Is that true? It might just be on your personal computer for the person who wrote that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits and trade-offs of both. One thing is clear here that it is a choice, and these are distinct governance structures, and they both come with both benefits and trade-offs. And we've heard a lot of benefits and trade-offs. These are just a selection of just a few that we're lifting up because we've heard them the most frequently throughout this process. So benefits of strong mayor, there's clear accountability. It clarifies that the mayor is in charge of operations, creates electoral incentives for the mayor to deliver results, and ensures that the person with executive authority is directly accountable to voters. It also unifies executive direction. Department heads receive consistent priorities from one leader rather than navigating competing demands from both the mayor and the city council. There's decisive leadership. It allows for faster decision-making and response to crises and challenges, which may be more suitable to a larger and more complex city. Under council manager, the benefits of that approach that we hear frequently, that it leads to professional management. The city manager is selected for administrative competence rather than their political appeal. They can be insulated from politics. The administrative decisions are buffered from these short-term political pressures that the mayor and the council are subject to, that the manager can make unpopular but necessary choices around resource allocation, personnel, or long-term investments without facing those immediate electoral consequences. And there's continuity and institutional knowledge. Professional managers typically serve longer tenures than elected mayors, and that provides some organizational stability across election cycles. We also have heard about trade-offs or risks of each system. Under strong mayor, the quality depends on the individual. Electoral popularity doesn't mean that they are good managers. A charismatic but administratively weak mayor could make governance worse in the city. There's a concentration of powers. We vest significant authority in one person, which could increase the risk of abuse, corruption, or capture by special interests. And there's a shorter term focus. Electoral pressures may drive mayors towards visible quick wins rather than long-term investments with delayed payoffs that might not pay off until long after their term is over. On the council manager side, the things that have risen to the top that we've heard are slow decision making. If the council is fractured or dysfunctional and is having a hard time getting to consensus, consensus might be difficult to achieve and decisions might be slowed. It can gridlock or paralyze city administration in that case. There are questions about democratic legitimacy. The unelected administrator holds a significant amount of power over city operations and priorities around resource allocation, and they don't have that direct voter accountability. We also see here that's been lifted up is that, professional managers are often chosen because of their professional expertise, which typically means having served in a role like this in another city. So often they're coming from other cities and maybe less rooted in the community. It could lead to limited responsiveness. Without electoral pressures, managers might prioritize operational efficiency over community responsiveness and engagement because they're not receiving that direct input every day from the public. Just a quick comparison of these approaches towards the mayor's goals around better defining the role of elected officials. Strong mayors create clear accountability with the mayor responsible for operations and the council responsible for legislative priorities. In a council manager form, it shifts the electoral accountability to the council collectively and the city administrator professionally. So it creates more clarity across the roles because it aligns that administrative authority with the professional expertise and makes the policy body the legislative body. Around addressing responsible city financial planning, it promotes fiscal discipline through political accountability and executive veto power. And on the council manager side, it promotes that fiscal discipline through professional management, people who are assigned in these roles that typically have a lot of experience in municipal finance. And on improving government accountability and transparency, it establishes a clear chain of command under the mayor in a strong mayor form, which simplifies and aligns authority with the public expectations. On the council manager side, it removes the complexity of having both an executive and a legislative branch and instead creates a unified government. I will say, it's important to note that neither, all of these are not going to solve all of Oakland's problems or issues with governance. There's a lot of things that happen in terms of process improvements and things like that that will also need to be included with any changes. So I think now we're going to break out into discussions, and thank you to everybody who's been adding their thoughts and input in the Q&A already, and we encourage you to continue to do that. We are going to break everybody up into smaller working groups at this time and have you talk among yourselves a little bit about what what's coming out of your thoughts in terms of how we're structured and what governance options might be the best for Oakland. We've developed some discussion questions to help guide the conversations, and they're here. I'll share a little bit more about each of them, and we will share them in the working group rooms for you as you're talking about this. And then we'll come back after we've broken up into discussion rooms to share back with each other. And so at that time, we'll just ask you to raise your hand and we'll take you off. We'll ask you to unmute and you can share your thoughts verbally. So the first question is, do you believe that adopting either one of these approaches would help to address the problem statement that we laid out and the issues that Oakland is facing? So that's really, yes or no answer, like is either one of these approaches going to help support Oakland? Then is there an approach that appeals to you more and why? And so thinking from a personal angle about which one of these resonates more with you, why does it resonate with you? Are there I know there's probably a mix of people here today, some who know very little about the charter, some who might know quite a bit about the charter. But are there other changes that you just saw in the way that the Oakland is structured that should be considered to help Oakland achieve the goals of better defined roles and responsibilities, financial management, and accountability and transparency? And then does one approach, and this is a little bit different from the second question, does one approach feel like it's a better fit for Oakland and why? So there might be a difference in the way something that appeals to you personally and what you think is the better fit for Oakland, and just to explore that a little bit as well. So I think Sean is going to be splitting us up into some separate breakout rooms to have these conversations. We'll give you about 15 minutes in the breakout rooms to discuss. We would encourage everybody to, share the space with each other, introduce yourselves to one another, and make sure that everybody has a chance to talk. I just want to remind everybody that, we're all here because we love Oakland, and we want Oakland to work really well. And so it's absolutely okay to disagree with each other, but please do so with curiosity about the other person's viewpoints. And then we will come back in. You can always take yourself out of a breakout room. If you have questions for us, we'll remain in the host room. And we'll come back together in about 15 minutes and share out. All right. So I think with that, Sean, if you want to go ahead and right, Gail, did you want to go through these last couple of slides and just talk about the next steps? Oops, you're on mute though. I'm sorry. I think. Are you able to come off mute?
There we go. Okay. We're encouraging you to stay involved now that you've taken this first dive into this subject matter. There have been a number of these meetings, and we're really happy that you've caught the last one in this series. And as we'll show you on the next slide, we've got a survey out. The slide will give you the QR code. It will also give you the URL for Mayor Lee's website where you could find the URL. You can also find the discussion guide that we've been using in some of the in-person community meetings, and you can find that little video that we played for you at the beginning. Now, the working group that we talked about initially is now hard at work on the report that it is going to issue its advisory report in January. That will be a public report, and we certainly encourage you to read it and to watch for announcements about the rollout of that and additional opportunities potentially to discuss their recommendations. And then importantly, stay tuned to your city. We pointed out that the city council may get to work on formulating a ballot measure for charter change during the period between January and June. And there may be people gathering signatures if that kind of effort comes together for any group that wants to undertake it. So those are the two ways we actually will move towards a ballot measure in the January through June timeframe. And then if a measure does come to the ballot next November, we really urge you to seek out additional education, which I'm sure many groups, including my own, the League of Women Voters, will be providing. And most importantly, make a decision and vote, having under your belt some knowledge about whether or not what is ultimately proposed is a really good formulation of how our government could be organized to function more effectively. And there you have that QR code for the survey. And you also have the URL for Mayor Lee's website where you'll find that additional information. And I believe you can look there for a recording of today's presentation once we get that organized. Nicole? You have the results of the survey?
Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen to find it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Share the results. I'm not sure if you can see them or not. You should be able to now. So we have a strong feelings that that yes, adopting one of these approaches would solve the problem. Statement. A couple of people saying no are unsure. Under the approaches, it looks like we have 22% say strong mayor, 48% say council manager, 22% says either could work, and 9% says neither option. So thank you so much for completing this. We really appreciate your input today. Definitely stay tuned, as Gail said. There's a lot more to this process after this. And thank you for coming out today. We really appreciate all of your participation. Have a great day.